gonna hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of record. The storm's been hitting us hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on. One other thing. I think it rips through your clothes when it takes you over. Windows found some shredded long johns, but the name tag was missing. They could be anybody's. Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired. Nobody trusts anybody now. There's nothing else I can do. Just wait. R.J. McCready, helicopter pilot, U.S. Outpost number 31.
Hello everyone, my name is Christina. A very warm welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is the place where we gush about the films that we love and try understanding the ones that we don't. As you may have already gathered, on today's agenda is the 1982 science fiction horror film entitled The Thing. It was written by Bill Lancaster and directed by John Carpenter. In it, a group of Americans are expeditioning in Antarctica when they make contact with The Thing, a parasitic alien life form that assimilates and imitates other organisms. This leads to the group members in question being unable to trust one another and an increasing sense of paranoia. A key frame of reference for us will be The Thing's source material, which is a short novel that was published in 1938 by John W. Campbell Jr. entitled Who Goes There? I may also make brief comparisons to another film that was inspired by Campbell's writing that is called The Thing from Another World that came out in 1951. Who Goes There makes references to approximately 40 characters, though 16 are named, whereas The Thing consists of a modest 12. It can't be said for sure what went into deciding which of Campbell's characters would have a cinematic equivalent or otherwise, but a majority of their duties are a fair summation of what would have been occupationally expected of them given the context. Where Lancaster maybe misses the mark in regards to characterization is in the realm of personable diversification. Very little is disclosed about elements like memories, etc., that could invite emotional attachment in one way or another, and it is hardly made clear how The Thing is affecting relationships and dynamics that are now presumably being warped by strife. This is also probably the appropriate time to note that Childs is a made-up character who works to bring antagonistic energy to the bunch. Given orientating factors, it is likely the difference in the amount of time that passes that lends to The Thing's poorly realized characterization. Covering the span of a whole week, Campbell's novel is better suited to use occurrences that otherwise wouldn't be intuitive to a survival-related situation, such as arguments about who will stand watch while the rest of the crew sleeps, to speak on conflicting interactions, and this is a drastic contrast to the mere hours that pass in Lancaster's screenplay. Limited by the special effects possible at the time of its release, The Thing from Another World utilizes narrative techniques that prioritize anonymous dread over explicit depravity. Not only do most of the deaths in that film occur off-screen, but the final thing looks rather pedestrian as opposed to particularly grotesque. Fast forward 30 years, and with the help of FX master Rob Bottin, all things would be possible. Pun intended. Originally offered a budget of $200,000 from Universal, as this was the cap for monsters effects at the time, Bottin successfully campaigned for fiscal assistance in the total sum of $1.3 million. It was clear from the very start that Bottin's crew wanted to capitalize on The Thing's ability to look exactly like its designated target, and it's during the interruption of easement that these efforts go largely appreciated. Not only that, but there's enough variance in The Thing's appearance to warrant conversations about its life cycle, in a shorter period of time. In order to achieve all this, Botton's crew worked tirelessly over a period of 14 months with hardly any days off. And some of the effects utilized, like the chest chomper, took 10 plus hours to set up on their own. Not only that, but this workload eventually led to Botton being hospitalized after production was over with double pneumonia, a bleeding ulcer, and acute exhaustion. Despite all this, at the time of the Thing's debut, critics would not hesitate to call Botton's contraptions gimmicky or shallow, but others have gone on to endorse them as preferential in developing the themes of paranoia and suspicion. As alluded to, much of the Thing's pacing is affected by an imposed sense of urgency amongst its characters. Given the simple fact that readers of Who Goes There are made familiar with daily routines, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that its characters are also given ample opportunity to study their imposter while simultaneously trying to avoid its direct influence. This is transposed through rules that are a tad contradictory on the surface, like not allowing anyone in the crew to wander off alone. And secondary to this, communication geared toward finding out what a thing's primary objective might be outside of exterminating the human race. This is interesting when squared with assumptions made by McReady's cinematic crew when their own lives come to depend on them, and even more so when the thing's capabilities aren't being pondered further. You can imagine, if you will, how different the thing might be if it was successful in implying that a thing has an ability to read minds and project thoughts onto other people, or if it found time to think on whether or not a person even can be aware that they have been infected to begin with. These complications and more, like the need to pretend things are normal so as to keep outsiders from intervening and being infected, are present in Campbell's writing, but rather sparse in Lancaster's. Criticisms related to the absence of these elements are best warranted when taking into account instances in which one person acts without the best interest of their companions, irrespective of what side they might come to represent, such as destroying a radio room, as this could be used to escape to safety or as a way of finding and luring new targets to copy. But it is still hard to judge how such elements might influence a story that is designed to get dramatic quick and stay at what is basically an all-time high. Regardless, these topics make for nuanced and insightful headspace, and it isn't to the thing's detriment if viewers come prepared to think more deeply about its real-world applications.
You the only one who made it?
Not the only one.
Did you kill it?
Where were you, Charles?
Thought I saw Blair. I went out after him. Got lost in the storm. Fire's got the temperature.
Arguably, where Carpenter and Lancaster have been found to practice their best judgment is in the ambiguity of the thing's conclusion. At first, Lancaster wanted an ending similar in affinity to Campbell's, but with a different outcome. In Who Goes There, the humans come out clearly victorious, but Lancaster wanted the things to prevail and be given an opportunity to survive. With Carpenter not being a fan of this ending, Lancaster drafted 4 different versions of the thing, with one ending being similar to Campbell's. In another ending that did not test well with audiences, McReady is left sitting on his own, with the implication being that he will eventually die alone. Drawn to the power of equivocation, it is the thing's evasiveness that has solidified it as a classic, and this has led to endless debate over which crew members become things and in what order their subsequent transformations occur. This openness to interpretation has been contradicted by claims made by Carpenter, like his assertion that the video game made in 2002 as a pseudo-sequel to The Thing is canon, but the relationship between psychological derangement and egoism remains well intact throughout. Which brings me to my last and perhaps even most important point. You might be wondering what's going on here, and don't worry, you aren't seeing double. At the risk of stating the obvious, this is at least 4 sets of identical twins from various movies. Whether the flair they've been written with is comedic or horrific, one thing that many of their interactions have in common is an aura of deception that their audience members are persuaded to buy into. The Thing is more closely related to the subject of shapeshifting. However, as is the case with most pieces of science fiction, it can be contextualized as either social commentary or something a little more personal. So, some food for thought before we say our goodbyes. John W. Campbell Jr. grew up with a mother that had an identical twin. This twin visited his home often, but disliked John and subjected him to behavior that made him wary of interacting with someone that should represent consistency, comfort, and safety. Relative apprehensions are reflected in the narrative structure of who goes there and the thing, as is the frustration with deciding how much someone's behavior can deviate from normal before it can be labeled as a threat. No matter the extrapolations, what can be inferred is that Carpenter and Campbell would likely reject the notion that imitation on its own is the most sincerest form of flattery. It might even be a recipe for disaster. If you are still watching, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. My name is Christina. As always, questions, comments, and concerns are encouraged and welcome below, in addition to suggestions as to what movies I should be watching and analyzing next. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Bye.